Yo, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome in to the Fantasy Roundup. I'm your host, Spencer the Guru Urquhart. Next to me there is Gabe Henderson. We're here to bring you all the latest info regarding fantasy football, fantasy baseball, fantasy basketball's over. But any comments, questions y'all have, drop them in. Appreciate everyone rocking with us here on this Tuesday afternoon. And fired up for this one because we're going to break down the remaining fantasy relevant free agents. Should be a fun episode, man. You ready, Gabe?
Yeah, I'm excited. It's a fun period in the NFL where we get to see these guys who are still pretty good, can offer a lot to teams, get to predict where they go, see it play out.
Oh, yeah, man. I know Daniel's ready. Daniel, one of our regulars, says, what's up? And I see he's got the champions, man. It looks like a Lakers banner there. Well, if your Lakers, they got swept by who ended up being the NBA champion, the Denver Nuggets. Congrats to the Nuggets last night, defeating the Miami Heat 4-1. Nikola Jokic, Finals MVP. And man, I don't want to get too off topic, but I just want to comment about that. That was so funny seeing him being like, he's like the most, like, as dominant as he is. He just wanted to go home. Like, he wanted to win, obviously, but once he got it done, he's like, all right, the job is done. Let's go home now. Like, I mean, damn, I've never seen someone that quick after a finals be that ready to just be like, all right, well, let's go home. Like, just so casual.
Did you see the video of
Yeah,
I
good
forget who
afternoon,
it was,
Jerry.
one of the reporters who was reading him. They're like, "You're the fourth person to ever have this stat line in a finals, joining like Tim Duncan, KD, and LeBron." And he's like, "Oh, okay, it's not that impressive."
Man, I think he's got Tim Duncan beat as the most humble superstar of all time. I didn't think I'd see it today, especially in this day and age with social media and stuff.
That's
but
crazy.
Joker goes to show that you can still be great and have humility at the same time. But anyway, let's get into our headlines here. Dalvin Cook released by the Vikings. We're definitely going to talk about Dalvin Cook here with this episode being themed around the fantasy relevant free agents. He definitely qualifies as that, as well as DeAndre Hopkins. He was released, I think, now 2 weeks now. He's been a free agent for a good while here. D-Hop met with the Titans recently. Did not come away with a deal, though. So the DeAndre Hopkins free agency saga continues on. We'll break him down here in a few as well. And then James Robinson, here's one that's not fantasy relevant, really, but I figured I'd throw it in because it surprised me that he already got released by the Patriots because this dude used to be fantasy relevant. James Robinson, as a rookie with the Jags, was really good, thinking maybe he'd have a resurgence with New England, but not going to happen. He is cut and probably won't. If I had to guess, he probably won't play another snap in the NFL. I think that Achilles, unfortunately, hampered his career there. And then the Nuggets, we talked about that, won the NBA Finals, but to the demise of DFS players, Tyler Hero, a no-show after they said Eric Spoelstra said he'd be active, but didn't play a single minute in the loss for the Heat. So very disappointing for anyone that rostered Hero. I definitely wouldn't have, because even I figured if he would play, it'd probably only be 10 to 15 minutes. And of course, it ended up just being a decoy. So for those that were smart and didn't fall for that, kudos. But for those that did, well, I mean, it sucks to suck. I mean, it probably shouldn't have. He's a big name, but even if he would have played a little bit, I doubt he'd have made much of an impact. Just kind of just goes to show, though, you got to like read between the tea leaves, because even though he was quote unquote active, he really wasn't. He was just a decoy.
Yeah, I think you called it last week, if I'm not mistaken.
What about Hero?
Tyler Hero. I think you said last week. We can go back and watch the tape. I'm pretty sure you said he wasn't going to play at all in the finals, despite maybe being active a game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just didn't really see it happening because, just got the kind of injury. It's one of those tricky injuries. I was thinking maybe he would, but I guess I think what I did say was even if he did, he wouldn't be fantasy relevant. So hope everyone took that advice and didn't play him in their lineups. But speaking of the Saints minicamp, Jerry, I'm glad you brought it up because that's going to be our next topic here. Saints minicamp, day one's in the books. And to me, the biggest question for minicamp, I got it posed here because we all know the basics, right? I mean, we know as far as Derek Carr, I mean, he's the new quarterback. We know he's going to click with Michael Thomas and Chris Olave. That's not a question. I mean, any quarterback, hell, even Andy Dalton clicked with Chris Olave. Like, I mean, it's just when you're that good as a receiver, anyone pretty much can click with you that has a right or left arm. But Derek Carr, to me, the question is with Derek Carr, with all these other like options behind them, we don't really have a clear third option right now for the Saints, especially with the news of Rashid Shaheed already banged up to where he hadn't really seen the practice field much, which everyone assumed he'd be the number 3, which I still think he could. But with him being banged up, to me, this could open up an opportunity for one of these other guys. So to me, the biggest question is which Saints receiver not named Olave or Thomas will click with Derek Carr, because we've got a lot of options. You know, A.T. Perry, the rookie, 6th-round rookie, could break out. Traquan Smith, I know he's been a ghost for the most part in his Saints career, but who knows? He might have a resurgence with Derek Carr. I'll say a resurgence, more like a breakout. He's never really panned out other than, like, I think they keep him around because of special teams. Then none of this might not matter, though, because if the Saints bring in Hunter Renfrow, like I'm thinking they could, then he'll be the clear third option. But that's not a guarantee, because, I mean, they still have to work out a trade or something with the Raiders, which we'll get to later. Because Renfrow, even though he's not technically a free agent, he's a name we're going to mention because of the fact there's a good chance he could change teams in the coming weeks. But James Washington's another name to look out for, as well as Brian Edwards, 2 veterans the Saints brought in. Neither one have done a whole lot throughout their NFL careers, but they're guys that have shown flashes. And Edwards, a guy that worked with Carr in their time with the Raiders. Washington never worked with Carr before, but he's a guy when healthy. He's hardly ever healthy, but when he is healthy, he can stretch the field. So it's going to be interesting to see if any of those can stand out and possibly take over the number 3 receiver role. Because to me, even though Shaheed is the guy for now, it's a pretty wide open deal, especially if his injury lingers.
Yeah, you know, I think you mentioned the guy that I had pegged that you mentioned earlier is A.T. Perry. I think the Saints actually got great value with him when they drafted him. Mm-hmm. And especially for a young receiver, reps this early on are so important in developing that chemistry with the quarterback. So I think A.T. Perry will develop some good chemistry with him going forward. He's a young guy, really, really good skill set. I think he could have an impact, but as you mentioned, in the end, I think it'll be Shaheed will be the number 3 clearly once he's healthy.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so Shaheed to me makes for a good dart throw pick in drafts, and then Perry might be the number 4, assuming they don't get Renfrow. But another blurb that came out was about Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara didn't report to OTAs because they're voluntary, but not at minicamp's mandatory. He was at minicamp. And he apparently had great chemistry with Derek Carr. Derek Carr really impressed by Kamara's route running as a running back. So assuming he avoids a lengthy suspension, I think he gets at least 6 games. But if he gets 6 or less, you know, I think he's definitely still worth a pick in the 6th or 7th round of drafts. I mean, look at DeAndre Hopkins last year, had the 6-game suspension, came back and was very relevant. So I think Kamara, assuming he avoids a 10, 12, you might even get a full season depending on how the court case plays out. But assuming he avoids a disaster scenario, he's going to end up a value, because we know Derek Carr likes to target the running backs. Josh Jacobs caught a bunch of passes last year in a career year. So if Kamara's on the field, he should produce a lot more than last year, because last year everything was clogged up. Saints had no real downfield threats with noodle arm Dalton. But if Kamara can get freed up and get out in space, like he might have a bounce back this year.
Yeah, you know, I'm one of those people who refuses to believe that Alvin Kamara will actually be suspended until the day he is suspended. You know, we've just been kind of kicking the can down the road. But as you mentioned, there's going to be a lot of value in fantasy drafts for a guy like Kamara, especially if this suspension is 6 games or less, as you alluded to.
Yeah, I mean, that's the Saints' MO. Kick the can, so they can keep pushing it back. You know, it's like, are they going to pay up one day? Well, maybe, but not today. That's the day, not today. Maybe when Mickey Loomis retires. I kind of feel bad for everyone's going to have to come in and pick up the pieces, because, damn, Mickey is really pushing this kick the can thing. But we'll see how it goes. Saints mini camp. Hopefully no major injuries occur. That's what we always hope for in these early offseason activities. Just no major injuries. But anyway, let's move on to the fantasy relevant free agents, and we'll start it off with Dalvin Cook, who has been trending lately. Was released on last Friday by the Vikings, and some odds in the market were out about his next team, and I actually agreed with these odds. They had the Dolphins as the favorite to land him, and I think that makes the most sense. Dolphins have nothing as far as a lead runner. They just got all complimentary backs. I mean, Mostert, Jeff Wilson, and the rookie Devon Achane. None of those guys profile as starters. And while Dalvin, I don't really like that for fantasy, though, because those guys are still going to be involved. Yeah, Dalvin will start with Miami, but it probably won't lead to a whole lot of fantasy production because they just, with Mike McDaniel, he's cut from the Kyle Shanahan cloth to where it's gonna be a committee backfield, even though Cook would be the superior talent. But for fantasy, I want him to go to the Denver Broncos because we all know what a Sean Payton offense means for running backs. It means a lot of production. Sean Payton, as a head coach, as he's gotten older, he used to be more pass heavy, when he had Drew Brees in his prime. But to go into Denver, Russell Wilson, not all that great last year. I don't think Sean Payton's going to let Russ cook. I think Sean's going to want to run the football there in Denver, especially since they've got a above average defense. So with Javonte Williams coming off a knee injury, I don't think he's going to be 100%. Samaje Perine is okay, but he's more just a complimentary back. I think Dalvin Cook would slide right in with Denver, feel like that Mark Ingram big back role that Sean Payton has produced, several great backs in that role. I mean, Mark Ingram, the most notable, but when you go back, look at the Saints, Chris Ivory, different guy, Pierre Thomas, like a lot of guys that, go way back. Deuce. I know that was more before Sean Payton's time, but it's just, the Saints have a history with those bigger backs, and I think Sean Payton's going to want to do a lot of the stuff he did in New Orleans with Denver because it was overall effective. So I think it's going to be a run-heavy team, and with Javonte having a multiple ligament knee injury, I don't think they're going to want to push him this season. So I think they're going to try to bring in a veteran like Cook, and I don't know if they'll get him. Like I said, I think Miami's probably going to get him because Miami's also probably a slightly more attractive destination as far as chasing a ring, which Cook at this point in his career might just be like, F it, I want to chase a ring. But Denver, though, for fantasy, I think would be, like I said, a perfect fit from the standpoint that he'll have plenty of opportunities for touches, which is what we want for fantasy.
When we were discussing this the other day, and you sent me the list of free agents we were going to discuss, I sat down and I wrote two destinations. I didn't look at odds or anything like you did, and I like the Dolphins, or I think the Dolphins are going to land him like you, but I like the Broncos. And like you mentioned, Dalvin Cook would immediately slot in and become the focal point of that offense. I know they have some talented receivers, and people are saying that Russell looks better this offseason. I don't know how you can look much worse. But yeah, like you said, Sean Payton, I think, would really look to a guy like Dalvin Cook. It would be Dalvin's offense. They would let Dalvin cook, and Russell Wilson could be the sous chef.
They would let Dalvin cook. Yeah,
Yep.
he's a cook. Shoot, I think his IG handle Chef Dalvin. So it makes sense. Just let the cook, and Russ. He can just be off to the side. Russ could be the waiter. Russell go take the orders. Like, you want the Let's Ride special? Dalvin will cook everything up there for Denver. So yeah, I think that would be a good fit. But let's move on to DeAndre Hopkins, who, man, I hope this doesn't happen, but I think he's going to end up a New England Patriot because they need receiver help. They brought in Juju, but Juju's not a number one. They need more than just Juju. They also brought in Gesicki. They're probably going to feature tight ends a decent amount there. Bill O'Brien, he's the guy that he got Gronk going back in the day. So, I think he's probably going to try to throw the tight ends out. But it's like you don't have that X receiver, someone to really play on the outside. Where with DeAndre Hopkins, he's been a Pro Bowl X receiver his whole career. That is what he is. That Juju can then focus on the slot because right now all they've got is Devontae Parker and Kendrick Bourne. Neither of those guys are going to cut it. So I think the Patriots pony up and sign him. Bill Belichick's known for swooping in late in free agency and bringing in guys like Hop, guys because I think the Patriots definitely still want to compete, even though they're on paper the worst team in the AFC East. They're not just going to lay down. Bill Belichick at his age, it's like he knows his time's, the clock's ticking. He doesn't have too many years left to where it's like I think he's going to try to swing. And to me, if you're trying to win, you got to have firepower. You got Josh Allen, Tua, and Aaron Rodgers. I mean, Mac Jones is definitely the worst of the bunch, but how are you going to help him catch up? Give him some damn weapons. I mean, the Jets have weapons. They brought in the ones Rodgers wanted and Garrett Wilson. The Bills have enough weapons. The Dolphins have plenty of weapons, Hill and Waddle. Come on, man. You got to give Mac Jones a chance. Like, so to me, with that being said, he's probably going to go there, which I just don't really like it, though, because that offense, they're probably going to spread the ball around a lot, the tight ends and Juju. Or I want him to go to the Chiefs because we know Kelsey's going to get his, but outside of Kelsey, what do the Chiefs have that's reliable? Not a whole lot. Kadarius Toney can't stay healthy. MVS isn't reliable. They lost Mecole Hardman. They got Sky Moore and the rookie Rashee Rice. I mean, none of those guys are proven target hogs. Where if you bring in D-Hop, there'll be enough to go around for him and Kelsey because Mahomes is a 5,000-yard passer. So to me, in that offense, I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think they're going to be able to fit him under the cap. But if they can, come on, Chiefs, make this happen. Like that'd be so nice to have Hopkins, getting to work with the future Hall of Famer there in Mahomes.
Yeah, my heart tells me DeAndre Hopkins, I would love for him to come to Houston, come back, reunion, but I don't see it happening at this point. I just think that was to kick off the free agency tour. I think I read a report earlier, New England's hosting him for 2 days. I think he'll go to the Patriots, and I think he will do well with the Patriots. He knows the offense and Bill O'Brien. And I don't think Mac Jones being the quarterback there is going to scare me away from him in fantasy because, I mean, look at early in his career. DeAndre Hopkins made a living catching passes from bad quarterbacks. So I think he'll be just fine. He knows the offense. Everyone knows what he can do. And I think this has been brewing ever since we saw that conversation on the sideline between he and Belichick before a game.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see it, because Bill Belichick's a guy that, he brought in Randy Moss back when people were like, he's old, he's washed, and then had a big resurgence. So I could definitely see that happening. Why not? I mean, it would just make sense. And I just see my dad is, I agree with this. Yeah, Renfro would be a better fit because Hopkins, it's just like, I mean, he'd be nice, but you just don't really, I mean, when you've got Olave, it's like he's going to be that X receiver or you just don't really need Hopkins. I mean, it'd just be more of a luxury. And then Dalvin Cook, it's like, I think Kamara, I'm hoping only 6 games because I know injuries are bound to happen, but I just don't see any way that the Saints bring in Dalvin Cook or DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, for one, I don't think they have the cap to do it. And 2, it's like, you got Jamal Williams and Kendre Miller and in the receiving core. I mean, if you bring in Renfro, then that'll complete that. So, yeah, it's just, to me, these kind of guys, it's like, and plus the Saints just aren't really like the big market per se. Like, I feel like a guy like Hop, or like, Patriots, a fairly big market. The Chiefs, not really a big market, but you got Mahomes, like, and you got the allure of like, I go play for Bill Belichick, or I get to work with Mahomes. Then like Dalvin Cook, it's like, get to play with Sean Payton, and Miami's got a lot. I'm not trying to diss the Saints. The Saints have a lot going for them. It's just compared to some of these teams, it's like I don't know if they're. And plus their cap, I don't know if they've got enough money to afford these guys. But speaking of someone maybe the Saints could afford, I don't have them landing him, but maybe they could, is Kareem Hunt. If they feel that Kamara is going to get a big suspension. Kareem Hunt is a name that is getting slept on, y'all. I don't know how this guy's still a free agent. I know he wasn't that great last year. He's just a backup to Nick Chubb, but I still think this guy has gas left in the tank because the last few years, he hadn't had much mileage. He's been the backup. So I think he's still got fresh legs. He's not that old. I think he still has some juice left. Unfortunately, though, I think he's probably going to end up back with the Browns because it's like, hey, that's a run-first offense. I know they want to build around Deshaun Watson, but he's familiar there. They're the ones that took a chance on him after his suspension, and I think he'll probably just end up going back home there. But for fantasy, I think he'd be a really good fit with the Cowboys. I think him and Tony Pollard would make for a nice 1-2 punch because I was looking more in the Deuce Vaughn, the rookie the Cowboys drafted. I didn't know that dude's a scat back. He's only like 5'6". Like, I thought he had more size to him, but he is not at all like Zeke to where, Kareem Hunt isn't quite like Zeke, but he's a lot more similar than freaking Deuce Vaughn. Hunt is a guy that is capable of being a lead back if needed. So I think him and Tony Pollard would form a nice committee, because I think that's what they want there in Dallas, a committee. I don't think they're going to want Pollard to be a bell cow, which is why I'm not touching him in the second round. I mentioned that a few weeks ago in my rant, how fantasy people are going way too crazy over Tony Pollard. So to me, Kareem Hunt would be the perfect fit, and to me, he's got more left in the tank than Zeke. To me, the Cowboys shouldn't bring in Zeke. I didn't even include Zeke on this list because I feel like Zeke and Leonard Fournette, I feel like they're washed. Like, I feel like Kareem Hunt, though, might have something left. So we'll see where he goes, but I'm hoping Dallas.
Yeah, and I also have him going back to the Browns like you, but I think one fun, interesting wild card option could be the Buccaneers. Because let's face it, Kareem Hunt's not going to be a starter at this point in his career. I don't think anyone. Well, I mean, obviously the fact that he's a free agent still is indicative of that. But
yeah,
I think you could do a lot worse than the Buccaneers. Behind Rashad White, they have Chase Edmonds. Come on, are we still?
Yeah, it's terrible.
Edmonds is relevant in 2023.
I mean, he might be because the Bucs just don't have much else. So it's
and that's why I like Hunt there. Hunt could do a job there, and in an offense that's really even in a division that's really, I'm not going to say up for grabs because I think the Saints are the clear favorites. But if the Bucs want any chance at making a playoffs run,
you're going to have to run the football because Baker Mayfield is not going to,
especially with the quarterback situation.
Yeah. Baker Mayfield, Kyle Trask, they're not going to. If you get in the shootouts, well, so you're probably not going to win. So you're going to have to try to play good defense, low-scoring games, which Todd Bowles is a defensive-minded coach. I definitely think the Bucs are going to want to change their identity this year. And, yeah, I see them. That could be a landing spot for Zeke, honestly. Like, I mean, they had Fournette, but they cut ties with him. Definitely not bringing him back. But Zeke maybe is someone who can just have to chew clock and stuff. Like, or Hunt, too. I mean, they definitely need running back help because Rashad White he's all right, but he's probably not a workhorse. And then Edmonds, I mean, that dude he was on like multiple teams last year. He's just not good. So yeah, I could see it. That whole offense just reeks to me. I don't think I'm not going to want to have anything to do with Tampa Bay. Even as good as Chris Godwin is, it's like, man, with that and Mike Evans, I feel like they're just, now that Brady's gone, it's like RIP to their fantasy value.
Yeah. And the reason I like Hunt there is because they have a terrible quarterback situation. The best way to mask that is by surrounding them by weapons. They've already got the receiving talent, and I think White's an excellent young running back. But like you mentioned, I don't think he's got the potential to be a workhorse, and that's where Kareem Hunt comes in. And let's be honest, if you're the Bucs, you're not going to be competing anything for any.
Yeah, you wouldn't think they'll be competing. I mean, the division does stink. I mean, even though he's like the Saints are the favorite, but that's. In any other division, the Saints wouldn't be the favorite. The Saints are decent, but the Saints the Saints, let's be honest, the Saints have a lot of holes. I mean, the defense, I don't think is quite as good as people make it out to be. They lost a lot in free agency, and the offense has question marks. I still feel like left guard's a hole. The receiver depth's kind of sketchy to run him if Kamara gets suspended. I'm not trying to be negative. I still think the Saints win the division, but I just want to pump the brakes a little bit as far as saying they're a heavy favorite. But yeah, I just think if someone does steal it from them, it'll be Atlanta and Carolina. There's a reason Tampa Bay is projected to be in the cellar. They stink.
Yeah, so if you add a guy like Kareem Hunt, I mean, and it doesn't work out, that's okay. Because no one's going to really bat an eye. You're going to stink anyway. But if, let's say you're the Cowboys and you bring in Kareem Hunt and there's some people who still want Zeke back. Let's say Kareem Hunt doesn't produce. People are going to be up in arms about it and calling for Zeke back. So it's a decent reward. Decent reward, decent risk move. Let's say that or even low risk.
Yeah, I'd say low risk, decent reward. There's really not much risk because if he does stink, well, Zeke might still be out on the street. Right? Like, hey, Zeke, come back. Or Leonard Fournette. I mean, they've been running backs. I don't want to say they grow on trees, but they're like the closest thing to kickers as far as if you have running back injuries, it's pretty easy to find someone to come in. But I see my dad makes a good point here. They need running back insurance, but yeah, it is hard to keep everyone happy when you have that many. Look at this, reminds me of the Adrian Peterson situation. The Saints brought in Adrian Peterson that year. I think that was Kamara's rookie season, 2017. They're like, man, you got a three-headed monster. You got Ingram, Peterson, Kamara, they can't be stopped. But the problem was Peterson used to be, and all day, like the workhorse. And so he was barely getting on the field because Ingram and Kamara were the big dogs at that point. Talent-wise, Peterson had lost a step, but he was, you could see him on the sideline. He would complain every game to Sean Payton, put me on the field. And then after 3 games, he got released. The Saints just, so I think that's why the Saints aren't rushing to add more running backs. So they saw what happened that season, that, Peterson basically just ended up being a waste of a roster spot. So, yeah, I definitely think they probably could stand to bring in someone, but definitely not Dalvin Cook, because a guy like Dalvin Cook used to be in that bell cow.
And let's be honest, like you said, you can find all of these guys who will give you this type of production on the street midseason. And, it's crazy. I was going to mention this back when we did headlines about James Robinson. I think he finished 5th in rushing his rookie year, and now he's probably going to be out of the league. And I know some of that
torn Achilles, man. Those are devastating injuries.
Yeah, but it just speaks to the value or the devaluation, I guess, of running backs in modern day NFL.
Yeah, for sure. I actually got a rant about that, about how there are some running backs that should still be valued. We'll get to that here in a few minutes. Let's wrap up our free agency talk with a non-free agent. We're going to cheat here, Hunter Renfrow, because name's been in the rumor mill a lot with the Raiders. They signed Jacoby Myers this offseason. He's going to be their new slot guy. Where does Renfrow fit in? They're going to kick him outside, or maybe just kick him off the team altogether if they don't have room for him, and especially if they could save money against the cap by trading him or releasing him. Hadn't been released yet, so I think they're still holding out hope for a trade partner, which I think could be the Saints. The Saints have shown they're not afraid to trade for pieces they want. And I think if Derek Carr goes to Mickey Loomis and is like, look, me and Hunter had a great connection, I want him on this team, which they did in 2021. Renfrow was a Pro Bowl wideout. Last year he was an afterthought because of Devontae Adams, but before Devontae Adams, Renfrow was like the number 1 over there. So I'm thinking that he lands with the Saints, but I don't think that'd be a good fantasy landing spot because he'll be stuck behind Olave and Michael Thomas. If Michael Thomas would get hurt again, well, at that point, then Renfrow would be relevant. But assuming Thomas is healthy, which I know that's a stretch, but if he somehow is, I'm not saying this would be a bad fit because he would have the chemistry with Derek Carr, but I'm going to be picky here. I think for fantasy, I kind of like to see him with the Titans because they've got, I know the offense isn't very good, but they've got, they don't have anything at receiver outside of Treylon Burks, but him and Renfrow, I think, would complement each other because Burks is a big guy, outside threat, not a slot guy. The Titans have nothing in its slot. Right now, their slot receiver is a guy named Kyle Phillips, who's done next to nothing at the NFL level. And Ryan Tannehill is a veteran QB. If they can bring in Hunter Renfrow, I think him and Tannehill to Renfrow is going to be a pretty nice connection because I don't think Will Levis sees the field as a rookie. Even if the Titans suck, they'll probably just ride it out with Tannehill. Or maybe they'll do like the Falcons did last year, let Tannehill start most of the year, and then toward the end see what they have with the rookie. But I still think, with that being said, Renfrow, we'll see a lot of targets there because they just don't have much. Where with the Saints, it's going to be harder for him to be consistent.
Yeah, it's a real interesting case, but I will say that when it comes to fantasy, I don't like the Titans for anybody. I think Tennessee's a ticking time bomb. I think they're going to blow things up, and everyone knows it's just a matter of when. That team is going to stink, and I don't think, Tannehill is not what he was a few years ago. I think he showed that recently. So I don't really think you'd get much out of Hunter Renfrow. But, if you look at any of the other teams that have little to no receiving cores, I think you could find some production there for Hunter Renfrow. Teams like Atlanta or Indy come to mind, and I know...
Yeah, Atlanta could be a good fit.
I know Indy's got Alec Pierce as the number 2, but let's be honest, I don't think Alec Pierce is good enough to be a number 2. Might be harsh to say that after his rookie season, but I just didn't see enough there. So I think those places would be better landing spots for him than Tennessee, but I think the Saints are definitely a realistic option.
Right. Yeah, I think the Saints would be a decent fit. But yeah, that's the thing. He'd be a number 3 with the Saints, or with Tennessee, he'd be at least a number 2, maybe even a number 1, to where it's like, I know the offense isn't that good. But look at the Raiders. in 2021, they weren't a very good offense, but because Renfro was like the only game in town, he did well. Which with Tennessee is a chance he might be like the only game in town as far as he'll get more targets than he can handle. But we want that for fantasy. We want volume, so that's why I feel like that could be a good spot. But I actually think the Saints, for Saints fans out there listening, I think Renfro, I think Carr is going to go to Mickey at some point here in the next few weeks and be like, look, we're just a piece away, Mickey. We're just a piece away. Let's trade for Hunter. And I think they bring him in because they brought in Foster Moreau. They brought in Brian Edwards. They're definitely down to bring in pieces that have worked with Carr before. So I think Renfro will be that next piece to, because they're definitely not bringing back Jarvis Landry. I didn't even include Jarvis on this list. No offense to him. I mean, he's a great receiver. Well, he used to be a great receiver, but now he's just, he showed last year, he just didn't have even though his Instagram handle's Juice Landry, he was definitely lacking the juice last year outside of week 1. When him in week 1, I was like, oh, Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry. Wow. Like you're thinking, man, this is going to be a nice Saints receiving core. Nope.
Hey, you got Chris Olave out of it. He ended up emerging.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Nice
And Shaheed. Yeah, the future came a lot quicker than we thought. And then it was Jameis Winston. We're like, man, we got Jameis throwing the MT and Jarvis. But yeah, that's and it gave that eliminate all Titans. Derrick Henry, bro. You can't eliminate the OG. Man.
No, you can't eliminate Derrick Henry, but that's mostly because of the fact that Derrick Henry will probably wearing different colors by the trade deadline.
Yeah, if they do the Christian McCaffrey thing, yeah, which I was so mad about that because I traded McCaffrey in a dynasty. I traded him. He was like, oh, he's stuck in Carolina. I need to get off him. He's always injured. And a week after I trade him away, he gets traded to the 49ers in real life. I'm like, damn it. And sure enough, I got fleeced in that deal. So I will feel like I win most of my trades, but even I slip up sometimes. Also, make sure I've been tried to be very conscious of trade. I've been very cautious about trading since then because, man, that I rushed into that deal. But, oh, well, enough about that. Let's move on to fantasy baseball waiver wire because I know this is the mid-season grind for all those fantasy baseball players out there looking to better their teams here. And there's a lot of young options out there and also a lot of utility options. As you see, Gabe's got a utility player there. I'm going with Jordan Walker, Cardinals young phenom outfielder / third baseman. He's an outfielder in real life, but for fantasy, he's eligible at third base as well. And somehow still rostered in less than 50% of leagues, which is very surprising to me considering this guy is the number 1 prospect on the MLB.com prospect pipeline. Like, I mean, I know the Cardinals suck right now. I mean, they're my favorite team. They are terrible in real life. But for fantasy, Jordan Walker is, I mean, this guy's got the potential to be the next, like, Acuna as far as someone that can do it all. Truly 5-tool stud. And I know he's really young. I'm not saying he's going to match Acuna this season, but I think he's definitely going to put up enough numbers to be a starting outfielder, top 30 outfielder the rest of the way, and maybe even like third base, top 10 third baseman. So if he's got dual eligibility and he's a guy that he's got capability to do it all, he makes contact, he's got power, he can run. Like, stop sleeping on this man. I mean, it's like it's crazy to think like, if the Cardinals were playing better, people would be more on to him. But it's like with the team not doing that well, and he kind of bats down in the order. But I think as the year goes on, they'll probably move him up, especially if they fall out of contention. Let the young guys shine. So because it's like even if they fall out of contention, a guy like Jordan Walker is not going to just pack it in. I mean, this is a guy that's looking to prove himself. But I see you went a different route, Gabe. You went back to the well with an Astro there and Mauricio Dubon, who I know he's been hot lately, but sell me on why I should pick him up for fantasy going forward.
Yeah, I'm double dipping here. I had Mauricio Dubon as one of my early guys to pick up with Jose Altuve out, with Dubon the starting second baseman early in the year. But now that Altuve's back, Mauricio Dubon has just been too good to keep out of the lineup. This is a guy who last year when he was traded for Michael Papierski, and I know every LSU fan's ears just perked up at that name. When he was traded for Papierski, who was in AAA at the time, nobody really thought Dubon, who was a career utility guy with the Giants, no one really thought of anything of it. But he's played so well now, he's forced his way into a World Series winning team's lineup. He's obviously been helped out by some injuries, with Altuve earlier in the year, and now Yordan Alvarez is facing a lengthy stint out. So Mauricio Dubon, once again, an everyday guy. And he's got that eligibility at second, short, and in the outfield. He's going to be starting in the outfield mostly. He's a guy that Dusty Baker likes a lot, and he's hitting up near the top of the lineup, leading off some days, hitting middle of the pack others. It really just depends the lineup on the day. But Mauricio Dubon's positional flexibility, both in fantasy and in real life, make him an almost must start for the Astros. And this is a guy who's hitting 300 this year. So, Michael Brantley's suffered a setback. He's still not back for the Astros. Yordan is now out for a little while. So even though the Astros do have a lot of outfield depth in with Jake Myers, Chaz, and Kyle Tucker out there, with their other two left field options on the IL and Michael Brantley and Yordan Alvarez, Mauricio Dubon's a must start. Guy who's hitting 300 still. So I think he's really, really useful. And I know a lot of people dropped him 15% owned in fantasy, but this is your sign to pick him back up.
For sure. I think the thing that sold me on it somewhat is, I'm still a little skeptical being that he doesn't really do that much well outside of batting average. But the thing that kind of sold me, though, was the fact that he's going to start getting everyday at-bats with Yordan out. I actually have Yordan in one of my leagues, and it's like I've got depth in that league, so I'm not too concerned, but it's just like, damn, it's like, Dubon could keep this up for at least for the next few weeks while Yordan's out, because it's like I want a guy that I know he's put up good numbers in the at-bats he's had, but it's like I want a guy that's if assuming I'm not in some super deep league, if I'm in like a 10, 12 team league, I want guys hitters that get everyday at-bats. And while Yordan's out, because you can kind of, as you say, you double dip, but that's just the nature of it. You just you got to add guys, drop them, add them back. It's like a cycle. So this is probably the time now to add Dubon, and he's probably not. Once Yordan comes back, he might have to drop him, but if he keeps hitting like this, they might have no choice but to keep him in the lineup.
Yeah, I would at least keep him through the trade deadline just to see what Houston does. The Astros, as we've seen in years past, they love to trade run-of-the-mill center fielders. You've got Jose Siri out in Tampa Bay, Miles Straw, Jake Marisnick. All those guys have been traded or let go from the Astros. They pump out outfielders, so – now that they've got some guys out there who are competing for at-bats in Marisnick and Myers, they could trade one of them, and Mauricio Dubon could have a more important role through the end of the season. You just never know.
Yeah, for sure. Yep. So it'll be interesting to see how all that goes down. But to close out the show here, for those just tuning in, you're listening to the Fantasy Roundup presented by Caesars Sportsbook. Shout out to Caesars. Make sure to go sign up with Caesars if you haven't already to get that risk-free first bet. If it doesn't win, you get it back. So sign up with Caesars if you're looking to bet a little something. But for those playing fantasy, I know y'all are probably wondering what Spencer going to rant about today. It's the off season. Why are you always ranting? But I feel like there's always something to rant about because it's never-ending NFL news cycle, which is the latest being about running backs, with the franchise tag. These running backs aren't getting paid. And normally I'm of the mindset of the new age of, you shouldn't pay your running backs. They're not very valuable. They're kind of a dime a dozen. But this is an exception here, y'all. Saquon Barkley. To me, the Giants need to pay Saquon Barkley because for this team specifically, he's the best player on their offense. Plain and simple. I know Daniel Jones did well down the stretch last year, but guess what? Defenses were keying in on Saquon Barkley. They started off a run-first team. They remained that way, even though Saquon wasn't as efficient down the stretch. It opened things up for Jones, and the offense as a whole was still efficient. They won a playoff game. Hell, they beat Minnesota, a team that had a good offense, so they were capable of getting in a shootout and winning it. So to me, they'd be idiots, though, not to pay him, because if you don't pay Saquon Barkley, he might sit out. He already said there's a card he could play sitting out the season. Lev Bell did it. Didn't pay off for him, but I think Saquon Barkley as a talent is better than Lev Bell. I think Saquon might actually have some leverage here because if he sits out and the Giants suck, which, when Lev Bell sat out the Steelers, they replaced him with ease. James Conner, over with. The team was just fine. But Saquon, they're not just going to be able to replace him just easily like that. Matt Breida is not a good backup. The rookie they drafted, Eric Gray, I don't think is ready to be a starter in year one. So, I mean, you've got to just pay this man. I mean, he's an elite running back. I know he's had his injury woes, but when healthy, this dude is a top 5 running back. And I mean, he deserves 10 plus million on a multi-year contract because he's not that old. Pay him, give him a 3 or 4 year deal, give him some guaranteed money. He deserves it. He makes your team so much better. And if you don't have him, if Saquon sits out, Giants are finishing last in the NFC East. I'm sorry, because I think the Commanders might be a little better than people are giving them credit for with Eric Bieniemy now as OC. So Brian Dable, I mean, I know it was a good story from last year, but you better convince Saquon to stay on. And then also the Giants front office needs to pony up and pay him because without Saquon, it's going to be a long season. Daniel Jones will get exposed.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd go as far as to say the finish last. I don't think the Commanders are all that great. But if you want to compete with the Phillies and the Dallases in this division, Saquon Barkley is the difference.
Yeah, he most definitely is. But he's the best running back in the division. That's the edge they have here. I mean, Tony Pollard, he's on the tag too, but he's no Saquon Barkley. The Eagles brought in DeAndre Swift. He's no Saquon Barkley. And the Commanders, the committee with B-Rob and Gibson, neither of them are on Saquon's level. This is the big advantage the Giants have over everybody else in the division. So, like, yeah, you gotta just pony up and pay them. I mean, they did it with CMC and Derrick Henry. I don't think those teams are having regrets. The Panthers were able to get a decent trade package for CMC. The Titans, I mean, if it wasn't for Derrick Henry, they would have been worse than the Texans. So it's like, you gotta pay up when you have a special talent like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes, sir. Well, that's gonna wrap this one up, y'all. Fantasy Roundup. We're live every Tuesday at the same time. Appreciate everyone that tuned in. Any final? Oh, we got a final comment here about if things don't improve soon, it might be time to blow it up. Go all young for the Cardinals, as much as it hurts to say. Yeah, I was saying that a while back, because I was just seeing, I saw the handwriting on the wall. Now Ryan Helsley's injured, so the already woeful bullpen is even worse. Yeah, I mean, sometimes things go through cycles. I mean, unless you're the Yankees or the Dodgers and have unlimited funds, you're going to go through phases of being a buyer and being a seller. And I feel like this is a cycle of baseball where sometimes you just kind of make some bad decisions, get yourself in a hole. And good thing with the Cardinals, though, is they've got a lot of veteran talents. I mean, you got Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado. So you could probably get a bunch of talent back for those guys if they would put them on the block. I don't know if the Cardinals will be willing to do that, but if they're 10 games out come the trade deadline, I think there's a decent chance they do. And, yeah, that's going to – just be glad your Astros are in the up cycle. I know the Astros just about a decade ago were in that cycle of having to blow it all up and be sellers.
It's kind of fun going through a rebuild.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially when you reap the benefits on the back end.
Yeah, I mean, I've never had to go through the rebuild as a Cardinals fan, but in a way, I kind of welcome it because it's kind of overdue. I feel like they were just milking it with Yachty, but now that Yachty's gone, I mean, his leadership's clearly missed. I think it's time for a reset. So will be interesting to see, but that's going to do it for this episode. Appreciate everyone that tuned in. We'll be back next week and keep breaking this stuff down. LSU baseball made it to Omaha. Might have a little LSU baseball talk next week. Maybe a guest. You haven't had a guest in a while. Might have to maybe bring Devin back or have someone cool come on and chop it up here and give some different insights from the outside NOLA.com, or maybe bring in a Saints beat writer or something, or an LSU. We'll figure it out. But until then, this has been Spencer the Guru with Gabe Henderson. Thanks again, y'all. We out of here, and we'll be back Thursday on Bayou Bets YouTube channel. Zach and Jim will be back with Bayou Bets to preview LSU and such. So subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Peace out.